Stay down! I said stay down!
I am not resisting.
You walk in dressed like that, expecting everyone to slow shoot ya! I don't care how many medals you're wearing.
My identification is legitimate.
It happened at 6:14 p.m. on a Sunday evening, inside Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. A black man in navy dress blues walked through the civilian terminal by himself. His name was Senior Chief Darnell O'A. He was 38 years old, an active-duty Navy SEAL with over 16 years in special operations. Less than 72 hours earlier, he had been urgently evacuated from a covert mission inside Iranian territory. The specifics of that operation would never be disclosed publicly. What could be seen were the effects it had left on him. A wrapped right hand, a stitched cut above his left eyebrow, eyes that hadn't closed in more than 40 hours. He carried a duffel bag over one shoulder and a sealed military dossier under his arm, marked with Department of Defense classification stamps. He had been rerouted through Atlanta on a military transport connection and directed through the civilian terminal to catch a flight to Naval Station Norfolk, where a classified debrief awaited him. The terminal was crowded with the usual Sunday evening rush. Families returning from trips, business travelers catching overnight flights, airline crews moving between gates. OA moved among them with the steady, controlled posture of someone trained to operate under conditions that would break most people. His pace was measured, his eyes forward, his uniform crisp despite everything he had endured. The ribbons on his chest told a story most people in that terminal couldn't begin to comprehend. He wasn't seeking attention. He wasn't causing a disturbance. He was an injured serviceman trying to move from one gate to another inside his own country. He simply wanted to make his flight. Officer Craig Bellingham stood near the international arrivals corridor with a coffee in one hand and his radio clipped to his shoulder. He was 42 years old and had worked with the Atlanta Airport Police Department for 16 years. During that time, 31 complaints had been filed against him, largely from Black and Latino travelers, excessive questioning, unnecessary pat-downs, aggressive detentions that led nowhere. Every complaint had been internally reviewed and dismissed. Some were labeled misunderstandings. Others were archived with vague references to high-pressure situations. None ever resulted in consequences. Among certain co-workers, Bellingham had earned the nickname the Gatekeeper. He wore it proudly, never fully grasping the resentment behind it. His partner that evening was Officer Nolan Fitch, 29, 5 years on the job. Fitch was quieter, more cautious, and had learned early that questioning Bellingham's judgment wasn't something you did twice. He stayed a step behind, scanning the crowd, following Bellingham's lead without hesitation. Bellingham's eyes moved across the terminal the way they always did, observing, sorting, deciding who belonged and who didn't. Then they locked onto one traveler in particular, a black man in navy dress blues, walking through the concourse with a duffel bag and a sealed envelope under his arm. Bandaged hand, cut above his eyebrow, exhausted eyes. Most people would have seen an injured serviceman returning home. Bellingham didn't. He saw a black man in a uniform that didn't sit right with him. Someone who didn't match his idea of what a senior chief should look like. He saw a target, and he was already moving. Bellingham stepped directly into OA's path. The space between them was less than 2 feet. "Hey, hold up. Where are you coming from?" OA stopped. His posture remained straight, his tone respectful. "Military travel, sir. I'm connecting through to Norfolk." Bellingham's eyes slowly scanned the dress blues, the ribbons, the bandaged hand, the sealed envelope. He didn't step back. "You look suspicious. Where'd you get that injury?" OA kept his voice steady. "I'm returning from an overseas assignment. I have my military ID and travel orders, if you'd like to verify." Bellingham extended his hand. "Let me see." OA slowly reached into his jacket and produced his military ID and folded documents. Bellingham inspected them like someone already convinced they were fake. He flipped the ID over, compared the photo, looked back at OA, then shook his head. "These could be fake. People buy these online all the time." "They're not fake, sir. You can verify them through." "I'll decide what I verify." Bellingham handed the ID to Fitch without looking at him. OA's jaw tightened slightly. "I'd like to speak with a supervisor." Bellingham's expression hardened. "You don't get to make demands. Put the bags down. Both of them." OA lowered the duffel to the ground, but kept the sealed dossier under his arm. "Sir, this document is classified military material. I'm not authorized to surrender it to civilian law enforcement." Bellingham stepped closer. His voice dropped but carried enough for nearby travelers to hear. "I don't care what you call it. You put it down or I'll put you down. Fitch shifted slightly behind them, his eyes moving toward the growing number of phones being raised. He said nothing. Oe placed nothing else on the floor. He held the dossier firmly under his arm, his voice calm and clear. This document is classified. I am not authorized to release it. That was the last full sentence he managed before Bellingham grabbed his arm. The grip was immediate and forceful, fingers clamping onto the same wrist already wrapped in gauze. Oe didn't pull away. He didn't shift. I am not resisting. This document is classified. Bellingham twisted the arm upward. The gauze tore slightly and Oe's jaw tightened, but he remained still. Then Bellingham drove his open hand into Oe's upper back and shoved him forward. Oe's knees hit the tile first, then his shoulder, then the side of his face. The sealed dossier slid across the floor, spinning to a stop near a row of seats. The impact echoed through the concourse. A woman gasped. A child near the window began crying. Fitch moved quickly and pinned Oe's legs. Bellingham dropped a knee between his shoulder blades and yanked both arms behind his back. The bandage on Oe's hand tore completely open. Blood smeared across the white tile. Stop resisting, Bellingham shouted. I have not moved, Oe said. His cheek pressed against the floor. His breathing controlled. You are on camera. Bellingham leaned closer. The body cam on his chest blinked red, capturing every word. Guys like you always have a story. A uniform doesn't make you somebody. The concourse had gone silent. Phones formed a wall around them. A retired Marine colonel stepped forward, voice firm. That man is in a Navy uniform. Let him go now. A young woman near the gate streamed live, her viewer count already climbing into the thousands. A man in a business suit announced loudly, I'm an attorney, and what I'm seeing is unlawful. Fitch leaned toward Bellingham, voice low. Craig, maybe we should call a supervisor. Bellingham ignored him. He tightened the cuffs and stood. Airport Police Sergeant Vanessa Traz came around the corner of Concourse B at a fast pace, drawn by the radio call and the rising noise. She was 44. With 18 years on the job, and had seen enough to know the difference between a real situation and one being created. What she saw stopped her. A black man in full Navy dress blues lay face down on the floor, blood beneath his hand, wrists cuffed, a visible knee mark on his jacket. Two officers stood over him. A sealed military dossier lay 10 feet away, classification markings clearly visible. Traz moved quickly. She stepped between Bellingham and the crowd, looked down at Oe, then back at Bellingham. Get him up now. Bellingham didn't move. He's non-compliant. Traz crouched slightly and picked up the ID still in Fitch's hand. She read the name, rank, and unit. Senior Chief Petty Officer, Naval Special Warfare. She stood slowly and met Bellingham's eyes. Her voice dropped. Craig, do you have any idea what you've done? Bellingham's jaw tightened. Take the cuffs off. Now. He didn't move. Traz didn't blink. That wasn't a request. Fitch stepped forward and removed the cuffs. Oe rose slowly. His right hand bled freely. The cut above his eyebrow had reopened. He flexed his fingers, wincing slightly, and looked at Traz. She met his gaze. Senior Chief, I'm Sergeant Traz. I'm calling medical and my commanding officer immediately. She retrieved the dossier carefully and secured it. Then she keyed her radio. Chief Pratt, this is Traz, Concourse B. I need you here now. We have a situation involving an active-duty Special Operations Service member and classified materials. Traz escorted Oe into a side corridor and into a small conference room. She offered him water and a chair. He accepted both. His posture remained upright, but exhaustion was catching up. Over 40 hours without sleep, a reopened wound, and adrenaline fading. Airport Chief Julius Pratt arrived within minutes. Late 50s, calm, composed. But the moment he saw the classification markings, his expression shifted. He picked up the phone and dialed the Department of Defense liaison. The call lasted less than 3 minutes. His tone was tight. Yes, sir. Active-duty naval special warfare. Classified material was exposed in a public terminal. Bodycam recorded everything. He hung up and looked at Traz. Within 20 minutes, 2 men in civilian suits entered the terminal without stopping. One from NCIS. The other carried Defense Intelligence Agency credentials. They secured the dossier first, then requested the body cam footage. The playback began in a closed room. It showed everything. The unprovoked stop, the profiling language, the refusal to accept valid military identification, the grab, the twist, the shove, The impact, the blood, the knee, and then the voice. Clear and undeniable. Men like you always have an explanation. A uniform doesn't make you important. It also showed the classified dossier sliding across a public terminal floor, visible to every camera and phone in the concourse. A potential intelligence breach created entirely by one officer's choice to force a decorated serviceman to the ground. The DIA officer stepped out of the room and placed a single phone call. His tone was flat. We have a compromised asset situation and an assault on an active operator. Initiate federal jurisdiction. He ended the call and walked back inside. Pratt looked at Traz. Remove Bellingham and Fitch from duty immediately. Radios, weapons, badges, body cams, everything. The NCIS agent added without lifting his eyes from the screen. And no one speaks to them before we do. A federal attorney reviewing the footage in Washington that same hour stated it clearly. This isn't misconduct. This is a federal crime on at least 4 counts. By the time the sun went down over Atlanta that evening, the live stream from the terminal had surpassed 2 million views and was still rising. The young woman who had begun recording near the gate never stopped. Her video captured everything from a civilian perspective. The shove, the blood, the cuffs, the crowd's reaction, and the moment Traz arrived and shut it down. News organizations began calling the airport's communications office before the Bodycam footage had even completed its first internal review. Local affiliates aired the story at 10 o'clock. Cable networks picked it up by midnight. By morning, it had gone nationwide. The Pentagon released an official statement within hours. It was unusually swift and unusually direct. An active-duty senior chief petty officer, returning from a classified overseas operation, was subjected to racially motivated assault by civilian law enforcement. The Department of Defense is fully cooperating with federal authorities and will ensure complete accountability. In Washington, behind closed doors, the language was far from diplomatic. A senior defense official stood before a room of JAG attorneys and investigators and said what the press release could not. He was evacuated under fire from a hostile nation. He survived what most people in this building will never have to face. And then he was forced face down onto the floor of an American airport because of the color of his skin. This ends careers. This ends freedom. There was no discussion after that. Only action. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division opened a formal investigation. Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General launched a parallel inquiry into airport police operations at Hartsfield-Jackson. NCIS formally took control of the criminal investigation, removing jurisdiction from local authorities entirely. That same night, Senior Chief Darnell Oahe sat in a quiet room at the airport and provided his full statement to a federal agent. His tone was steady. His recollection was exact. He described every word Bellingham had spoken, every instance of physical contact, every second of the encounter from the first step to the final cuff. The agent listened without interruption. When Oahe finished, the agent closed his notebook and said, "That's one of the clearest statements I've ever taken." Oahe nodded once. "I was trained to recall details under pressure." Officer Craig Bellingham was placed on unpaid suspension the following morning. His badge was collected. His firearm was secured. His access card was deactivated. He was instructed not to contact any member of the department or anyone involved in the investigation. He drove home in silence. Within 48 hours, his 31 prior complaints were pulled from internal records and placed under federal review. What the department had spent 14 years dismissing, the federal government began examining closely. And then the victims began coming forward. A black airline pilot named Captain Solomon Abra was the first to speak publicly. He described being stopped by Bellingham 2 years earlier while walking through the terminal in full uniform with his crew. Bellingham had detained him for 45 minutes, questioning whether his credentials were real, refusing to contact the airline for verification, and only releasing him after a gate supervisor intervened. Abra said he had filed a complaint. It was marked resolved with no action taken. A Latino TSA supervisor named Hector Padilla came forward next. He described being accused by Bellingham of trespassing inside the terminal where he had worked for 9 years. Bellingham had demanded his employee badge, called it suspicious, and threatened to have him escorted out. Padilla had filed a formal grievance. It vanished into the same internal system that had buried every other complaint. Then came a black mother named Simone Achebe. She had been traveling alone with her 8-month-old son when Bellingham pulled her aside for a random search. The search lasted more than 30 minutes. She missed her flight. Her infant cried the entire time. She said Bellingham told her that if she had nothing to hide, she wouldn't be so upset. She filed a complaint through the airport's public liaison office. She never received a response. 14 victims in total came forward within the first 2 weeks. Each story followed the same pattern. A person of color stopped without cause, a fabricated justification, an aggressive encounter, a complaint filed and buried. Internal emails surfaced during the federal review that confirmed what every victim already knew. Supervisors were aware. One email from a lieutenant sent 3 years earlier stated plainly, "Bellingham's numbers are high, but he keeps the terminal clean. Let it go." That email would become the centerpiece of the federal investigation, not because of what it said about Bellingham, but because of what it revealed about the department. They knew. They always knew. And they chose to ignore it. Craig Bellingham sat in his living room under the terms of his suspension. The television was on. His name appeared at the bottom of the screen. It had been there every day for weeks. His wife had stopped answering calls. His former colleagues had distanced themselves completely. The union that had supported him through 31 complaints over 14 years had gone silent. No statement, no legal fund, nothing. Every day, new coverage emerged. Another prior victim interview. Another legal expert analyzing the body cam footage frame by frame. Another segment about the classified dossier that slid across a public terminal floor because one officer decided a black man in dress blues didn't look right. Outside the federal courthouse, protesters gathered holding enlarged stills from the body cam footage. Bellingham's knee on Oais's back, the blood on the tile, the dossier on the ground with classification markings visible. Inside, attorneys prepared for what analysts were calling one of the clearest federal civil rights cases in recent memory. The Pentagon had not withdrawn its statement. Federal monitors were already assigned to the airport police department before a verdict had even been reached. Oae had not spoken publicly since his statement to NCIS. He had returned to limited duty at Naval Special Warfare Command. His commanding officer had made it clear the Navy considered the matter far from resolved. The body cam footage had surpassed 30 million views. It had been entered into federal evidence. It would be shown in a courtroom. Every frame, every word, every second of a decorated Navy SEAL's face pressed to the floor of an American airport while bleeding from wounds he received serving his country. And somewhere between a federal investigation and charges that could reach 20 years, a man who survived extraction from hostile territory in Iran sat in uniform, waiting for a system that failed him on a terminal floor to decide whether it would fail him again. The cameras were still recording. The world was still watching. And this story was not over. If this story affected you, don't just watch in silence. This case was disturbing, but the one on the right ends in a way no one expects.